Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massal, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. During the transition of pregnancy to being a parent, there's a lot of stigma surrounding it. In movies, you often see a mother post-pregnancy jumping straight back into the size that they used to be. And now you see it so often that you start to feel that that's the way it goes and end up waiting for that to happen to you. And I know when I first saw that, that was my idea of what it's like to go post-pregnancy. But seeing the reality is a totally different story. Now, our guest today is joining me to hopefully speak beyond that stigma and speak about the true realities of a healthy body image, especially postpartum and post-pregnancy. She is an applied health researcher and the founder of Amend Well, Dr. Simone Holligan. Thank you so much for joining me, Simone.
Thank you for having me, Dina. It's great to be here.
Now, working as a health researcher, what exactly is your role in sort of helping individuals understand their bodies, especially during a time where they feel so insecure about it?
Yeah, so I obtained my PhD in applied human nutrition. So what that means is that, I want to take what I do in research, clinical trials, epidemiological studies, and really apply it to members of the general public. So it's research that they can use. And so I'm really passionate about what it means to take care of our bodies and how having that sense of physical well-being is also connected to a sense of good mental well-being. And so, in nutrition, we have these two sides. So yes, you want people to be their best selves, their best physical selves, but you also want them to protect their mindsets, their mental health. And so, seeing food as not necessarily good or bad, but food as nourishment, and food can be used for celebrations, comfort, for traditions and cultural practices and so on. And so really having that involvement, in building people up, building the person up. So really taking a different approach to eating, food, nutrition, well-being being mental and physical.
Mhm. No, that's such a great perspective on it, especially the way that your role is when it takes place. Like, you're not just sort of saying this is the data and hand it over to someone else. You're sort of really directly saying this is the data. This is the way that a normal person who doesn't have a PhD, doesn't have a doctorate, can sort of understand that and sort of take it in and see, okay, this is what's harming me, or this is what the issue is, or this is what they need to focus on a little bit more. And it's a really great direct approach in a language that people can actually really understand.
Yes, definitely. And there was a point in time, well, I taught at the undergraduate and graduate level courses in nutrition and general health sciences here in Ontario, Canada. So that's where I'm based. And, there was one class that I would teach, Intro to Nutrition, and that would be a really massive class. It'd be like a first year class, but a lot, anybody can take it. And it was so interesting to see the guys that would come up to ask about, they want to like slim down, or, counting macros, and, they want to bulk up. And I think one time I incorporated into a class, I think that was when Marvel comics, well, the Marvel movies, Marvel franchise is really common or popular at that time. And I and got them to take a look at what Wolverine. I think he's Australian. I forget his name right now.
Hugh
The guy who
Jackman.
played, yes, Hugh
Yeah.
Jackman. Of course. So like, why am I forgetting Hugh Jackman? So he played Wolverine, and I was trying to show them what he ate to look like that, to play that role. You know, it was basically chicken breast and broccoli and really strict regimen, and try to let them know, you know, he doesn't look like this 24/7, 365 days out of the year. Like he is doing this to play this role. And then after, you know, he's going to revert back to, you know, what he considers, you know, appropriate for him and his family, you know? So it's really interesting. It's really discipline that I love.
Yeah, no, it sounds really amazing, especially when you're sort of seeing celebrities take on like the roles. Actors are really especially great example for that because they do everything just for the role, whether they gain weight or lose weight or build muscle or lose muscle. They do it for the role, and then you see them in real life and it's completely different, or they look different. They don't look the same again. And it's a great reality check for the people who are sitting there watching the film and being like, oh my God, they've got so many muscles on their arms, their biceps are huge. And
Yeah.
that you see that as like, that's how they look, that's how they are. But then you
Yeah.
forget that there are people that can have a love of food, that can have that huge amount of interest in just eating food, and they revert back to what they normally look like. So no, it's an amazing thing because especially that when we talk about like real versus fake, or what we see in films and what we see in real life, it's a two completely different scenarios.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So before we get deeper into that, and I want to thank you so much for that introduction on how you got into talking about this today. Before we get deeper into it, I'd love to get to know some of your interests and maybe some of your recommendations that a lot of us can sort of take upon.
Sure, sure.
So the first question is, what is the most recent book that you've read?
Oh, most recent book. This book called The Energy Bus. So I don't want to spoil it. I know it's a funny title, but it's not what I expected. It's really about, you know, changing your mindset about, you know, towards life. And it follows a man, and he's having a real breakdown in his family life, and at work, he's a manager and doing a terrible job. And he sort of misses work, gets on a bus, and things progress. And he learns a series of lessons through taking this bus for a certain period of time. But yeah, energy bus, and um, really making me think about how what we focus on, you know, tends to be amplified or perpetuated in our lives, you know. And so what does that mean for thinking on negative things or thinking on positive things? And, you know, the book really frames it as more like energy, and I don't want to spoil it, but it was a really light, fun read. So I would say like teenagers or adults, but I think he did position it as a more like a business organizational book, but it could be relevant for anyone who thinks they're like in a transition. It really caught me off guard. I picked it up. At work, we have like a little library.
Oh
And
yeah.
so you can take a book, leave a book. And I just thought, oh, I'll try this one. That's the one I started the year with, the energy bus. I should find it's an orange book, orange cover. But yeah, I'm not remembering the author's name at the moment. Try to find it.
It sounds like such a great read. Like it just sitting on a bus, and they take it such like metaphorically, like you're taking on a journey, you're taking a bus, you're trying to figure out where you're going, and different stops, different ways to get off. And then yeah, that sounds I love books like that because they take it in a way that people can really relate to it in ways that they didn't think that they could relate to it. And yeah, like what you want to spend your energy on, what you want to do, that like that sounds really cool. Okay, I'm going to search that up because I'm
Yes.
looking for a new list of books to add to my March read. And now, okay, that's probably going to go up in there because that sounds really fun.
Yes, I do recommend it.
So, when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you really love and would love to share with us?
I really love. I realize it's really hard for me. So I was a real movie buff,
Mhm.
like when I was younger. So much so that I'd be able to predict who would win an Oscar. I could tell who did the music score on film. So I think that was a very weird trait. I don't know why. So I watched a lot of movies, but I would say I really like coming of age movies. So either it's like a youth who's coming of age. So I maybe like Billy Elliot. There was one that I watched recently last fall, Nene Superstar, and she was a like a 12-year-old, 10 or 12-year-old um black girl who was a born natural dancer that she's based in Paris and she wanted to join the Paris opera ballet sort of school, private school, and she goes through that. And I think two of those stories, I think with Billy Elliot, the gatekeeper towards his dream was like internal, his father, whereas the gatekeeper in Nini Superstar was external. I won't spoil it. You can go and watch it. But I also like redemptive movies. So I would see that Shawshank Redemption is a very powerful movie. I've probably watched that several times. And I just love the writing in it. I mean, if you watch it before you know the story, but I just think the writing, the arc, the acting, it's just amazing. But I do see movies as art. So I think it's really hard for me to say if you want me to compare on something specific I can, but I can't pin down one movie at all.
So, do you have so your favorite genre is probably coming of age?
Coming of age or an origin story or like a transition. Like like this person was like this and I think Shawshank Redemption is probably the most dramatic one.
Mhm.
As you see somebody who was imprisoned falsely and he escapes and how he does that. So that is like he made his escape, he made his way, just like Billy Elliot made his way or Nene Superstar made her way. So yeah,
Yeah.
something about that.
It's a good I can tell that you're sort of like a love a journey kind of movie and book as well.
True. That's true. That's true. I never pinned it down, but yeah, that's probably it.
It
Uh,
tells a lot about you. And I'm very much the same. Like, I love those coming of age. Shawshank Redemption is like the best example for that because of even though he's falsely accused, he still sort of goes through that of like, okay, I'm still having to win something. He's still having to prove something, even though he knows that
yeah.
he was never a part of it. He still had that idea of, okay, I'm in here, so I have got to make the most of being in here, or I got to just live out my days in here until one day he realizes that he's more than this. Like
Uh,
there's such a true story, such a really deep story within it.
yes, he never gives up. That's really true. I never thought of it. And on the flip side, so with TV, I'm not really a big TV fan, but with that, the two that I like are Lupin and there's one called oh no, I'm forgetting, I'm blanking. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
It's a really good TV show. Oh, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, no,
Sorry, Tina.
definitely. There's so many that I think, especially nowadays, where there's so many that have those redemption arcs. They have those viewpoints of, okay, they're not the greatest person to start off with. They've done some really terrible things,
Yeah.
but they have a way of like helping someone else. So they have a way of like saving someone else's life. And I love those stories because you can always say that, okay, by the end of it, they're good again. Or by the end of it, they've realized that's how I feel about Lucifer, I think is one TV show that I really find great because he's the devil.
Heard of that.
And he starts getting better. So I definitely recommend you watching that if you do love those kind of shows.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks.
So now when it comes to podcast, is there a podcast that really stands out to you that you listen either when it comes to professional work or even something a little bit more personal?
I would, I've checked out the parenting podcast. I love it. I've listened to a few shows. And I think
Yay.
what you're doing is really, really great. Really, really helpful for new parents to be.
I'm so glad.
I think I enjoy a variety. I enjoy like some sports podcasts that probably come through YouTube, like the Pivot podcast, because they, ex pro athletes interviewing other ex pro athletes and some current athletes as well. Really fascinating to hear about their lives. Again, probably that that arc, the person and how they change. It's called the Pivot, actually, and so they get they get their guests to talk about their major pivots in life. I would say I've listened to Meghan Markle's podcast, I think called she's the Duchess of Sussex.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
sure. I get confused with names. I've listened to her podcast. So I do like more autobiography and let's see what else. Yeah, and just the Duolingo French podcast to help me brush up on my French.
I love that. I'm doing the Duolingo's Japanese one because I'm going to Japan end of the year.
Nice.
So I'm trying to learn as many as I can. So I can definitely relate to that. But yeah, I love Meghan Markle's one. I think I've listened to it in and out. I'm in and out of listening to it at the moment. And I love the way that she speaks. Like she speaks with such eloquence as well, where it's like you really want to sit down and listen to her. And it's definitely not something you can do while doing something else.
Yes.
You have to like really sit down and listen because there's so much of information that she's just wanting to share. And it's amazing the way that she delivers it. So it just really grabs you in and keeps you there.
Yes, definitely.
So now when it comes to role models, is there a person or maybe a group of people that you find yourself looking up to either professionally or maybe even personally?
Yeah, so the role models, I would say the people closest to me in life that I love. So my parents, my mom, my dad, my brothers, my partner, he's a wealth of information, knowledge, experiences. He's an artist, a writer. And so I think I draw from a lot of different people. Like I love to see, how they've gone through life, and they teach me a lot. They really do teach me a lot in different ways. If it had to be someone external, I would say two people. So there is this, so I would say Maya Angelou for sure. I've seen her perform her work, her poetry in person. It's probably like in the second row in the middle, so I could see her.
Oh,
So if I'm gonna
wow.
do something, I just go big, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really I admire her. I know she's passed on, but I love the way she writes. So I do write as well. I do write poetry, I do paint. So for me, her as an artist and how she's so authentic is really inspiring. Has always been inspiring for me. And there is this also another lady, African American lady. Her name is Ruby Bridges, and Ruby Bridges I've also seen speak in person. And she, if you're familiar with Norman Rockwell and his paintings, she was the key feature in one of his paintings. I think it was called "The Problem We All Live With," something along those lines. And you've probably seen it, and then you realize it's something like a little black girl in white dress walking with U.S. Marshals, like going to school. I don't know.
Okay. I
You've
think
probably
I've
seen
seen
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've seen it. It was on not display, but it was on in one of an article or something like that that I've probably seen around. It does sound
Yeah.
familiar. Like the
Yeah.
white
Yeah.
dress really makes it
Yes. And
definitive.
little pigtails, ponytails.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that she's a real lady.
Oh,
And
wow.
what, she was I think that she was like 6 years old, 8 years old, but she was the first student or a Black student to sort of desegregate all white school. I get it right in Louisiana. You know, I hope I got it right. Forgive me, guys, but yeah, she was really pivotal. So she tells her story on how she was going to school that day. The crowds were out, they were chanting, they were angry, but in her mind, maybe there was just some sort of festival or something going on. But she had to be escorted into the school with U.S. Marshals, and she sat in the classroom with. It was just her and one teacher, because they were still protesting. The other parents were still protesting, and they don't want to take her to school. And, hearing her talk, you really, if you ever get a chance to hear her talk, the grace, the growth that she shows as someone who endured that was just so captivating for me. I looked there, I heard her story, and I could not believe how grounded she is. How, it's like light, very light, grateful for life, and, carrying on. She does tell her story. She is, I guess you consider activism, but, more like educating people. But yeah, she was really inspiring for me. She is very inspiring for me.
Hmm. No, that's amazing. It's amazing how impactful, just how you look at a painting and you don't really think, it's just a painting. And then you really think about it, and it's like there's a whole story behind why that even exists. And people can look at it and see, oh, that's a nice painting. But there are some few people who do end up knowing why it was needed or why it was created. And I always thought it was just a painting. After hearing that story, now I need to look deeper into it for
Yes.
sure.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
No, well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for answering the questions. And I hope that we are both well warmed up in order to answer even deeper questions for today.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Now, I know that everyone has a very different definition as to what parenting is and what the role of being a parent is. So, either professionally or personally, what would your definition of parenting be?
Yeah, so parenting I really see as sort of a transmission of knowledge, a transfer of the mental models of the world, um, from the parent to the child, so that the child can learn from us as parents without having to go through what we've gone through. And I want to preface this here by saying, I don't have children of my own as yet, but I would see, so in the strictest Western sense, I'm not a parent, but I would say culturally or ethnically, so, having roots in Central Southern Africa. I do have Caribbean roots, but if you had to trace back my real roots, whatever, how you want to do that, in Central Southern Africa, there are a group of people groups or ethnic groups known as the Bantu people. And so you've probably heard this term, Ubuntu, I am because we are. And so that's a term or a philosophy that comes out of those people groups. So it's not like you have one mother, you have several mothers, because you're being raised by this village. You're being raised by, you have several brothers, several cousins that are watching out for you, and you're watching out for them as well. So you're really being raised by the village. But yeah, really that transfer of the men, you've already mapped out the world as an adult. So how can I transfer this best, however I've learned it, whether it's how to navigate school, navigate finances, navigate your first kiss, your first relationship, adolescence, your body is changing. How can I translate all of that I've learned to you so you don't have to struggle and get through it, right? And I think, maybe I really do think parenting is a skill that can be learned and improved upon. Um, and so in that sense, maybe that transfer can be done better, maybe within different parent-child interactions or relationships. I also see that parent-child interaction as not a one-way street, but really two-way. So in the literature, like really researching, might hear it being called as a bidirectional relationship. So not only is the parent transferring information or helping the child to learn, but the child is helping you to learn as a parent. So we ourselves are developing learning as an adult. Like we are growing. Like if they're an infant and they're 5 years old, like somehow we have also grown in that process, just as they have grown learning from us. We learn from them.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. It's such a amazing thing when you're talking about raised by an entire village, because the same, very similar thing in my experience back growing up in New Zealand and also being born in Malaysia as well. That whole community, when I went back there when I was younger, when I was a little bit older, the whole village was meeting me grown up for the first time, and the whole area was meeting me for the first time. And it was amazing being like, oh, I met you. I saw you when you were born. I saw you when you were a baby. Like everyone just knew who you were without you. And they saw photos of me growing up from my grandparents who were sharing around the whole village, because that's the way that they kept knowing that we're okay, that we're doing okay. And always, whenever I talk to my grandparents, they're always mentioning, oh, this person is wondering how you are. This person is wanting to see if they can add you on Instagram and all of that. And it's so great to know that there's a whole community that's rooting for you, in a sense. That's all like, oh, we know your mom so well. We raised your mom. We spent days with your mom. She was always at our house. Like those conversations are just so natural. So I know nothing that other than being raised by an entire community, on having a whole community sort of behind you. And it's so different to when you hear other people's experiences of just being raised by two parents or just being raised by a single parent, and seeing that it's such a new experience. And I love when you're sharing your experience as well, because it's a whole other thing, and passing down of information and all of that, where it's like everyone sort of has some say as to how you're going to handle the world, or how you're going to see the world, or what is expected when you sort of see the world in a certain way.
Yes, absolutely. You can learn from all of these people around you. You don't have to go through the same pain that they went through. That's the great part.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And so given that sort of definition and given that explanation, what do you think that expectant parents should be aware of when they're going through that transition?
Yeah, so when I think expectant parent, like I put myself in that spot too. I think I see it as like if you're starting a job for the first time, entry level job, you're starting at a fast food restaurant. They're not going to put you to start cooking right away. They're going to show you how to flip a burger, right? And get everything right, just the same, right? To pass it on to the customer. How much more raising a new human being, right? Like taking some time out to learn from others that have gone ahead of you on that journey, right? So whether that's, you're talking to a medical professional, your OB/GYN, or you're talking to your mother, your father, a close family member, a midwife, a doula, really informing ourselves and, on what is needed, what is parenting all about. I think we can only help ourselves and help, better that relationship that we have with our child, with our children, so that, it can be really fruitful, however you want to define fruitful, as you go forward. But I really think it does take some you have to be purposeful and, in learning, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, and understand things. What does it mean to be pregnant? What does it mean to breastfeed? What does it mean to, sing while the baby is in my womb? Like, what does that mean? Like, is there any research done on this? Or, did your grandmother always do this? And was it calming? Like, just learning things like that. And I think that can only make the parenting, the parenting experience less confusing, stressful, daunting for parents to be.
No, it's really true when it comes to that advice, because when you think about it, there's a whole lot of people who know a whole lot more. And there's a whole lot of people who have studied this for so long, who have built careers on this, built businesses on this. And if you're suddenly being like, oh, okay, I can't ask for help because I'm supposed to know everything just
Yeah.
because I'm a parent,
All right.
that's probably the biggest misconception that I've always hear from my friends when they're talking about their kids. I remember one of my friends who when she had a newborn, she was like, I don't know how to tell if the bottle is warm enough. Like, and I'm like, are you asking anybody? Are you looking towards anybody or asking? And she's just like, no, I'm trying to Google it, but there's like different answers to it. And like it's crazy how much you're expected to know about something that you're meant to keep alive. And it's like when you go to a pet store, for example, you go and get a puppy, you go bring a puppy home. You're not supposed to know exactly what it needs the first day you get it. You're only meant to know, okay, this is the food that it needs. This is the walk. You don't know what kind of temperament
Yep.
that puppy is going to have. I'm not saying I'm related to puppy to a baby, but like there's like a huge advancement towards what a baby is needing, whether it's
Yeah.
needing to be cared for, whether it's needing to be loved, whether it's needing to be, there's so many things that other people have studied for a long time in order to figure out that there's a lot of research behind this. Not every parent is supposed to know the research, but they're
Yeah.
supposed to know who they can ask to get the research.
Yes, exactly. And then recognizing that not some knowledge comes by way of books, and lectures and the medical establishment. But some knowledge will come from a midwife, a doula, your mom, or your dad, or, my brother, he has 2 kids. I would say he's better at changing diapers than I am, So taking away that stereotype, guys don't do these things. No, there are dads out there that do these things. And so, you know, tapping into the resources that are around you and, really educating yourself. But I really think through education and then experience, whether that's a community group on showing you, certain ways to, exercise, gentle exercise during pregnancy or how to breastfeed, can really help you within that transition period.
Mhm. No, it's really true. And one big topic that we're talking about today is body image. And that's definitely something that is a huge thing that really affects a lot of security and positive thinking after pregnancy and sort of dealing with that. Now, to start off with, what exactly is body image and how does that sort of evolve or change during a pregnancy?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an established like quote or reference for what body image is, but I'll share what I think it is. I really think it's like how we think and feel about ourselves, the sort of mental representation we have of our physical bodies, that connection of the mental and the physical. But can that mental representation of our physical bodies can be impacted by things around us. So family, friends, our peers, social media, culture, general media, as well as our sense of wellness, our sense of desirability, and so on.
Mhm. No,
Yeah.
that's such a great definition. And it's funny because when you think about definition, you're like, I know what body image is, but really trying to sit there and define it is I'm, when I was reading through the questions, I'm looking at that question like, how would I define what body image is? Like, it's basically how you see yourself.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
when it evolves and changes, it's going to be affecting how you see yourself mentally. It's going to be affecting how you want to see yourself physically. Now, what physical changes during pregnancy typically affect our body image?
Yeah. So I think we have to remember that pregnancy is a time of great physiological change in the human body. I just find it fascinating. I find physiology fascinating, but pregnancy in itself is fascinating. And so if we think about the 40 weeks of pregnancy, the first 20 weeks is really when the changes in the mom's or, the parent's physiology to store nutrients. And these are nutrients that we use later for the fetus. But it's really about storing nutrients and expansion in the mom's body or the parent's body. And then the next 20 weeks, that's really when you see growth of the fetus. And then the nutrients that are stored in the mom's body are shuttled or used for growth of the fetus. And I think I made some notes here because I didn't want to say the wrong thing, but it's such a great physiological change that, can you give me a second?
Fine.
Such great physiological changes can look like what happened to me. I don't understand what's happening to me when you step on the scale. And so in terms of what happens in the mom's body or the parent's body, in terms of weight changes, so you have breast tissue expansion, obviously, right? To produce and store milk, right?
Mhm.
So about 2 pounds added. The placenta, which is, helps to transfer nutrients to and from, and waste as well, between the mom and the developing fetus. So between 1 and 2 pounds, the uterus, this expansion and blood flow and so on, about 2 pounds. Amniotic fluid itself, about 2 pounds. Maternal blood, we call it maternal blood expansion. So the mom is producing more blood, right? Because blood is helping to shuttle nutrients around, particularly for the fetus. So that's about 4 pounds. And then fluids in the maternal tissue, within the the cells, there's cell expansion. So there's more cells, larger cells as well. There's fluids in those cells, about 4 pounds. Maternal fat stores between 7 to 8 pounds. And then the baby or the fetus in utero, about 7 to 8 pounds. When you add those all up, that comes up to around 30 pounds, just as is a 7 to 8 pound baby, but with all of those like sort of inputs added, within the change in the physiology. But what you see on the scale is like, oh my goodness, I gained 30 pounds, I gained 35 pounds. I can't believe this. Like what's happening to me? Right. And even the storing of fat and, my perception of fat, so this is really getting into more theoretical things on nutrition. I really see fat as an organ. I know people see fat as like this thing that is extra in our body and what's it doing there, but I view fat as an organ. It has its place, because it does help with metabolism, especially between times of, it looks like you're in a fasted state when you have less glucose. So especially in pregnancy. So when you're in the last half of pregnancy, in the last 20 weeks, the mom really has to depend on those fat stores for her metabolism because all the glucose, all like the carbohydrates or whatever are going to be pushed towards the development of the fetus. So all of these things are purposeful, and it's just incredible what happens. But I think even that, like letting people know this is what's happening to you. You're not abnormal. Like this it's not wrong. You're gonna see a change on the scale. And so when people have that personal education, then they can adjust their expectations. It's okay that I've gained this weight because this is what it's doing. It's normal. It's healthy, actually. This weight gain, and that's why I wanted to say this weight gain, this gain on the scale is actually healthy for me in this transition period called pregnancy.
Mhm. And that's such a, when you're adding all that together, it sounds like such a normal and logical way of thinking. okay, 30, you add 30 pounds. The way I'm sort of saying it, I'm like, oh, my brain is warped to be like, oh my God, that's 30 pounds added to you. But then the way that it really is, it's like, the child is growing up. The fetus is growing up. It's needing all that nutrients. It's needing all of that. And that's 30 pounds that you're going to have for a little bit of time while this baby grows into a full grown human. And
Yeah.
that's where your child, like the mindset that society, especially society, the way that we're in today, where like it all adds up. All of that adds up, and all of that is something that we have to worry about, and think about, and freak out about, and we have to deal with that later. And it's such a strange mentality for us to be in, where we're not really thinking about the child. We're thinking about our bodies are so different. And I can only say that from a perspective of seeing my friends go through that. But it's such a strange way of thinking. And I don't know whether that's sort of the mentality that society has sort of put us in, where films and TV shows have sort of warped us and said, okay, the mother is going straight back to work. The mother is dealing straight back to everything straight away and dealing as if she was never pregnant a week ago.
Yes. No, I would say media culture really play a big role. And so that sense of, I think the article that I wrote in the conversation, I think that's one that you had read. That sense of womanhood, the physical body of the woman and how it relates to desirability and um, either thinness in the Western world, a measure of thinness, or curviness, but still with a smaller waist, in other parts of the world. But that ideal female figure and form provides power to women. And so when you deviate from that ideal female form, there's a loss of power. There's a loss of power. I'm not as desirable to my partner. Maybe I'm looked at differently when I go back to work, or my mom or my brothers or whoever are taunting me whenever they see me hobbling around at home. And so all of that has to do with, I would say, with education. It doesn't always have to be in the academic sense, but just being informed, even culturally informed of what's happening and um, what to expect. And the thing is, with the preoccupation of wanting to go back to, my pre-pregnancy weight, I gotta lose this baby weight, is that women can start to restrict what they're eating during pregnancy, or even, work out in an extreme way to sort of moderate that weight gain, not knowing that it's not like they're gaining 30 pounds of fat. It's physiological changes that are necessary for the developing infant. And so for me, how I see it is that this preoccupation with needing to return to that pre-pregnancy weight, it's very similar to, it reminds me of body dysmorphia and how we look at persons at higher risk for eating disorders or disordered eating, however you want to call it. And so it's interesting that we don't have these guidelines aren't there for women parents that are going through pregnancy. It's almost like eating disorders are like in a class by itself. But I just want to present that or propose that no, this life stage pregnancy really need to be aware of not just their physical health, the physical health of the parent, also their mental health. Like, what's happening? How are they perceiving themselves? Is it body acceptance or body dysmorphia? And that how that can impact the parent, but also the child that's developing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I've never really seen it. I think, especially the way that you're talking about it, I've never really seen it as okay, you can still have body dysmorphia while you're pregnant. That that concept is such a strange thing to me, because you think of, okay, a lot of parents in general, so I'm just really generalizing here, but when it talk about pregnancy, you're like, you think that their acceptance of their body is a big thing. But then when in reality, there's still a lot of parents who are sort of seeing it as, oh, I'm fat. Oh, I've gained weight. Oh, I'm not as I used to be. And that's such a huge problem, the fact that it's not sort of a normalized topic of conversation when you're sort of attaching and you sort of expect every person going through pregnancy to sort of be like, oh, you have to accept that you're pregnant. Oh, you have to understand that it comes like that. But you don't really see it as, okay, so how do you feel about it? How do you feel about going through that? How do you feel about your body changing? Is it something that when you look in the mirror, you feel you need to lose? Is it something that you feel like you're insecure about? Because you sort of just like, everyone around them is always saying, oh, but you're pregnant, it's fine. They're not really validating the feeling of, oh, okay, so what do you want? What do you want me to say that would make you feel a little bit more confident in yourself?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, just making space for the pregnant parent. And so if they're surrounded by supportive people, that support network of family, friends, midwife, doula, medical practitioner, family physician, they can ask those questions, and see what needs to be done. And there's even that sense of feeling well, if you feel well. I mean, this is going into the medical realm. I'm not a physician, but for them, like how can I continue to feel well during this time and not have that sort of resentment? Oh, I was so ill during pregnancy and it was a negative experience for me. What does that mean? Um, going forward. But that's more like a mental health psychology conversation, going a little bit deep, but all of these sort of disciplines do weave into each other.
Yeah, it's amazing that they do, because I've had a couple of guests on, like, for other episodes and for other shows talking about different topics. And it's always amazing how easily each sort of nutrition and general practitioner and psychologists always fit in really well with each other and always seem to overlap in the conversations, because especially when we're talking about issues such as body image and such as mental health, there's always that overlap within each other. And I did want to know, when it comes to the cultural or societal expectations, are there sort of some differences in how body image is really perceived in either a cultural and more importantly, a cultural sense?
Yes, most definitely. So I think when I was speaking, it might have been from sort of a westernized medicine framing. It's funny how I say westernized, but then in Australia, I don't know how I group them. I know it's not West. So that's pretty interesting. Um, but but yeah, so that sense of thinness in the female form, even thinness in the male form to some degree, a little bit of muscle, but thinness. So, but in other cultures, curvy bodies are more revered. So it does change between cultures, and I think that's really important for having that support system around you and educating yourself on, like, what did my mom do? What did my grandparents do? What's relevant for us, and you know what should I eat? To help me feel a little bit lighter on the stomach, or how whatever changes are happening. So nutrition is very interesting. It I do think it needs to be culturally relevant. So one diet plan won't fit everyone. I really think it needs to be culturally relevant, culturally adapted, for that person, for that family, um, and within a certain setting as well, because it's not only culturally relevant, but can they access the foods that you're asking them to do? You're not gonna, somebody who is in South America and asking them to eat like they're from the Mediterranean, right? We have to be realistic. Even though you'll see promoted the Mediterranean diet, but how many people have access to those type of foods?
Exactly. Especially when food is so expensive. Like food in general, like the food that offers the most nutrition is always the most expensive.
Yes, it's
So,
true.
and it's
Fortunately,
always the ones that the doctors prescribe. They say eat this and eat fish, and I'm like, fish is a bit pricey. Like, look
yeah,
at salmon is so expensive at the moment, and
yeah,
it's an insane thing about they're not really adapting to the socioeconomic status or like what the patient can afford. And that's such an interesting part of it as well, because that really ties into, okay, if I can't afford to get that food, what's an alternative? Because unless you ask for an alternative, the doctors aren't really going to say, oh, if you can't afford that, then go eat that instead. Like, unless you say that, oh, so what else can I do? There's always that idea of, okay, the doctor's job is done, but you have to uphold it.
yes, 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 definitely. This socioeconomic side of nutrition and health in general is really important, and that's where practitioners have to come in. Fortunately, I think many systems they don't have a lot of time to spend with their patients. But I think with pregnancy, I think you see midwives and doulas. Doulas are how would they be classified? But they're practitioners who would be with the expectant parent before delivery, maybe some weeks into pregnancy, and before delivery for sure, during delivery and then after, helping you transition, even you know, showing you how to breastfeed and so on, and really being like a help for you, and your family. Yeah.
Mhm. No, that's a very positive way of gaining help and gaining some understanding. And we've spoken a little bit more on during pregnancy, but looking into post pregnancy and sort of dealing with that relationship, how does that negative body image after pregnancy really impact the parent and child's relationship as well, and sort of the parent's connection or lack of connection with the child?
Yes, I think this is a big one. And I think this is where the parenting experts, the mental health experts might, have more to say here. But I want to say that if the parent doesn't feel well during pregnancy and after, I think there can be, maybe it's unspoken, at least, but if there's physical unwellness, there could be the sense that yes, I gave birth, but oh, the experience was so traumatic for me. And then sometimes you can see that the bonding between mother and child may not be there. It could be strained for certain reasons, maybe a C-section and the mother needs to recover and so on, or the baby is in the NICU unit for a while. So that, because I think the bonding first few hours after delivery I've been told is very important. There's also that sense of a postpartum depression. I can't say that I know for sure the root causes of that, but that onset of depression in, following delivery. And so you'd hear moms, even some moms have talked about it on social media. You might find videos on TikTok, for example, but just that sense of they don't feel that joy that they were told they should have. And it's like a disconnect between them and the child. And so even helping them, how do they navigate around those negative feelings, or when their mental health is becoming poor, right? So postpartum depression is a real thing. And that can impact, the mother's willingness or ability to feed the child, to feed the infant, to breastfeed. Maybe they don't want to breastfeed. Bottle feeding. Are they really taking care of what the infant needs, keeping them safe? So it could have some pretty tough impacts. So I can't say that I know the cause of postpartum depression, but I have to say that if the parent has that sense of resentment that I felt ill while carrying you, or I don't feel myself after delivery. Like, I don't feel that joy. It can really impact that initial relationship. And, women, children are born in different circumstances, right? Like, not always from loving relationships or loving consensual relationships. So there are a lot of different reasons that could be could be contributing to a strain on that parent-child relationship. But I really think that's where the call for mental health supports come in. And if the mental health supports are out of reach financially, I really think the individual really has to draw on support from their family or friends that they trust. Really draw on that network and not, try to stick it out, rough it out by themselves.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really big thing, especially when you're sort of expected to be a parent at the end of the day. Like, you're supposed to be the caregiver for something so small and something so vulnerable, but you're still very vulnerable at that stage as well. So there's also that lack of compassion for yourself going through that, and sort of understanding that, okay, you don't have to know everything. Okay, my body is changing. Okay, I feel different. Everything feels like it's not working, and the amount of emotion that sort of comes in with that is going to be, I mean, I can just imagine it. I don't feel like I feel like I've seen a lot in films, or I've seen a lot in my friends, to be like, okay, that's going to be a really strange transition for anybody to go through, whether they're prepared for it or not. They can be reading 1,000 books during pregnancy and still feel like they're not really understanding why their body feels the way they do, or why their um, negativity in their head about how they look is so impactful on them, because that's not in a parenting guide. The parenting guide is mainly for how to look after a child, how to handle talking, how to handle breastfeeding, how to go through the changes that the different cries that the baby has, not how your body image, how you're going to look at the end of it, and how you're going to think about yourself at the end of it. So, yeah, I feel like there needs to be a huge conversation, a huge normalization on the way that your body is going to look different. And everyone can go say, oh, yeah, but you were pregnant, but it's fine. You were carrying a baby inside you. But that kind of talk, I don't feel like, from what a lot of my friends have said, doesn't feel like it's as encouraging as other people might think it was.
And the other piece might be that Lord's sense of desirability. So when they see themselves, their bodies have changed, gone through this transition, then they may not feel as desirable or as desired to their partner, their spouse, right? And that could even put a strain on relationship, right?
Mhm.
So you're not as intimate as before. And so what does that mean? And, a lot of things can happen in relationships, financial, mental, physical, and so on. So I think it
Yeah.
really gets, I think, yeah, not just education for the parent carrying the baby, but also for the people around them, what's expected. Because if they're expected parents together, these changes are happening. How can we transition through? And even education on what exercise can I do after? What can I eat after? And even things like realizing that if you're able to breastfeed, and not all women are able to breastfeed after delivery, but if you are able to breastfeed, the process, again, physiology comes into play. That process of breastfeeding actually helps the womb to heal or return to, if you want to call it pre-pregnancy state. So it's all built in. All these hormones and things are released
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah. It's like they're there for a reason, but we just don't,
Yeah.
not everyone really understands what that reason is
Yeah.
until you have to ask about it.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
sort of just like, especially breastfeeding, I feel like that's such an interesting part, because there's a reason why women can breastfeed, but at the same time, you're sort of just like, but you can breastfeed. Like there's no really, like, you don't really talk about why it's such an important thing or why it's such a big conversation. And yeah, it's an amazing thing that we just don't really talk about in a lot of senses. And not just pregnancy, not just breastfeeding, but like all the other aspects of post pregnancy. Like you don't talk about why your body is the way that it is, why your mental state, why you can't stop staring at the baby for 5 seconds, and like the emotional the emotions that sort of come in until they really see something wrong with it, until they really see, and that's when they're sort of like, okay, we need to tell you why.
Yes, or here's why, or let's get you
Exactly.
some help, right? When it escalates.
Like there should be
Yes,
a
which is
list of
great.
things
Yes,
to keep an eye out of,
yes,
especially for a partner as well, who's also, the partner is also trying to soothe both. They're trying to soothe the baby. They're also trying to soothe the partner that's just given birth. Like that's the whole role is changed, and the whole expectation of being a partner is changed as well. So yeah, we hope that we normalize that a little bit more
yes,
in the coming society that we're going into.
yes.
But this leads us really well into the practice and habit section of the show. And this is some of your own practices that you do yourself. So what is a practice that you do to enhance your own self-care?
In terms of practice, for me, practicing gratitude daily. So that is in the form of journaling, writing. I do try to take time. So I do paint as well. So have some time with some painting, like a watercolor sketch and ink and watercolor. Or when we had the period of the shutdowns, I did some large abstract painting, and that was a lot of fun. So I think more artistic expressions. I do like riding my bike, but in the outside, in the winter in Canada, you can only do that certain certain amount of months during the year. So then you have to transition. I don't really like indoor gyms like that. I prefer the outdoors. But yeah, gratitude daily has really been important for me. Taking a breather and just journaling out what I'm thankful for and what I hope for.
Yeah, no, that's such a great way of self-care, especially, I mean, building a lot of those skills throughout lockdowns, throughout those lockdowns as well, just building ways that you can sort of manage throughout every day when things are so out of your control, sort of allowing, I love, like I took on painting, and my biggest save was probably coloring books and just coloring it. I felt like an 8th grader, but like it was so nice to be able to say, okay, my control is coloring inside the lines. I can make it whatever color I want.
Yep.
I
Yep.
could paint whatever thing I want. It didn't have to make sense because no
Yep.
one's going to see it at the end of the day. And it's just those things, like I've built a lot of those skills, and it's so great to hear that I'm not the only one who has built those skills, because that is, especially when things are so chaotic, that is like the one thing that you can sort of just reach in and be like, okay, I know how to soothe myself. I know what works. I know what I don't have to think about. It can be whatever. I can just draw a line on a canvas and then add something to it later on as the week goes on. Like it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to build. And I love the fact that that's a practice that everyone does, because I feel so not alone in that now.
No, not at all. It's funny because a lot, when I was younger, or, it's in secondary school or whatever, I did more representational painting. It's hard to say the term, but anyway, when I did plein air painting, so you're outside, you paint what you see, and it had to look like what you saw. Or, painting a huge vase, and I painted oil. I love the effect of oil, but it took forever. But it was so beautiful and very representational. I don't know why I can't say that word today. But it's funny, when that time came, it was like, I just want to do something different. And I switched to acrylics, which I thought was so freeing. compared to oil painting. And then abstracts. And, I just do what I wanted. People would interpret what they saw. I didn't have to tell them. I didn't tell them a lot of times what it was. And it's something freeing about that. I really think it, for us as humans, I think how I would fight it is play. Play. If we look at animals in the wild, if we see images of them, they do play. If you see a bunch of lions, like a lion and the lionesses, sometimes they play. Like they play fight and so on, or all different animals, they have that sense of play in their daily lives. And I think that space that we take is that our playtime as adults, I guess, our playtime. And I think it's really critical. I think it has to do with the brain and, having less cognitive load. I think the psychologist would know more about that. Like I just know it from behavioral standpoint, but lightening that cognitive load so that you're more creative and expressive and can be more authentic we can be more authentic in our everyday lives.
No, I love that. And I love the fact that we're able to sort of relate it to a lot of other things as well, a lot of other situations where play is such an integral part of existing, of being a person, of building up our own understanding of situations that we may not be able to express in other ways, but recreating it.
Yes, yes.
So this leads us really well into the next section, which is the open mic. Now, this gives you a chance to talk about anything that you are passionate about, or maybe something that you want to promote talk about on our show today. So in the last minute, I'd love to give you the floor, and I'll give you the show as well for a little bit and talk about something that's on your mind for today.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm just in a space where, the research is tempered down a little bit, but really still interested in what's happening out there. But if you want to be connected, I can be found on LinkedIn. It's Simone Holligan on LinkedIn. I'm a research associate. That's my current title. But any updates will definitely be on LinkedIn. And my email address, I can be reached at holligas@uoguelph.ca. And so, yeah, any persons want to reach out for more info, definitely feel free by email or LinkedIn. I did want to make a plug for Ellen Satter, and I think one of your previous guests did mention her, right? The division of responsibility around eating. So Ellen Satter, really fascinating practitioner. So she's a nutritionist, but she's also a family therapist. And she has her mission really, and of the Ellen as in ELLYN, Satter, SATTER, at the Ellen Satter Institute.org, I believe. So that division of responsibility. So her mission is really to help parents and their guardians enable their children to basically eat with joy. So she takes it to another level. And I've actually used some of her work in my lectures when I'm lectured on nutrition through the life cycle. And so really fascinating approach. I really recommend any parents to be parents out there that want to know more about what it means to model healthy eating behaviors in yourself and your children. I would say Ellen Satter Institute. So she's very much public facing. It's not like you have to read a bunch of research articles. You can take a look at her website and get some really great information.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Simone, for joining me on the show today. And I'll definitely have a link to your website, a link to Amend Well as well down below for everyone to see that and look at that and maybe reach out further if they need anything or if they have any more questions as well. I'm pretty sure they will have more questions. I think just time-wise, we don't have time to answer all of them today. But if you do have any more questions that you feel want to be answered, then definitely send her an email or send her through a contact and she can definitely, hopefully help you out.
Sure, sure.
Thank you again, Simone, for joining me on the show. It was amazing talking about this, and I'm really glad that we got to have you on the show today.
Yes, thanks, Dina, for having me. Really appreciate being here. Thank you.
And I hope you guys learned as much as I did about post-pregnancy and even through pregnancy and dealing with your body image, and to know that you're not alone, I think is the biggest thing. So I hope you guys learned as much as I did, and I'll see you all in the next episode. You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.